Alrighty, here we go. Brand new Flyers Daily for the 4th of November, 2026. Flyers Daily presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. Flyers back in action tonight in Montreal to take on the Canadiens. Wow, the Canadiens off to a great start to the season. And the Flyers will get back on the road after 9 of 10 at home and what was a disappointing finish to the last 4 games last week. I mean, you guys know I talked about it. I wasn't busting out this black Uniball pen. I had the red Sharpie on those 4 games. They beat Pittsburgh in the shootout. Then they win against Nashville. Then they lose against Toronto on Saturday. And the one that really stings, obviously, is that loss against Calgary on Sunday, where they really had a hard time generating offense. And Rick Tocchet did not mince words. If you guys haven't seen Tochet's post-game press conference after the game and the loss against the Calgary Flames, I'd advise you to go on the Flyers YouTube channel, or if you're watching this on there now, watch it, because to me, he did not mince words. It wasn't like sharp with a serrated knife criticism, but it was pointed. And I think it was pointed at certain players that will know who he's talking about, because I imagine the messaging is consistent behind the scenes about being a team that wants to have that will. You got to have will. Will is not a skill. Will is a choice. And Rick Tocchet, I thought, was really on point in that game. We got to find people that are willing to do that and go to those hard areas and sacrifice and take the bumps and bruises, go with it, because that's what the game's all about. So if you didn't see that, I would advise to go watch that. As for the game tonight, Flyers and L'Habitant in Montreal. Montreal sitting there at the top of the Atlantic Division. 12 games played, a record of 9-3, 18 points, plus 8 in goal differential. And they have won 3 straight games. You got a team coming in feeling really good where they're off to with the start and what they've accomplished so far. They lost opening night to Toronto. They lost on October 18th at home against the Rangers, and they lost at Edmonton in a shootout 6-5. Since then, they've beaten Vancouver on the road, Seattle in overtime on the road, and they beat Ottawa in overtime at home. And it's the Flyers in Montreal this evening. Now, who's getting it done for the Canadiens? Well, Nick Suzuki leading the way with points. He's got 18 already in 12 games. Only 2 of them goals, 16 assists, 6 power play assists as well, but 2 power play goals, both his goals coming on the man advantage. But Cole Caulfield, he's got 15 points, 10 goals, 5 assists in over 18 minutes a game. Only 1 power play goal, 9 other goals for Cole Caulfield. I would assume they're even strength. He's not really a shorthanded threat. So he's off to a great start. Can he sustain it? We'll see. I mean, the shooting percentage is a little high. It's 29.4. But he's off to a great start. Lane Hudson picking up where he left off last year with 11 points in 12 games, albeit 1 a goal. And a guy to keep an eye on in this game is obviously Ivan Demidov. He's got 3 goals, 7 assists, 10 points in 12 games played this season. Got a little bit of a sniff last year at the end of the year to the NHL game. And he's off to a pretty good start as well. Flyers are going to have their hands full with some offensive talent there. It's really kind of, for the Flyers, they're not a team I worry about defensively. They're just a team coming off those last 2 games in particular, and especially on Sunday, a team that just didn't generate enough offense. And when you look at the goals for games played so far this season, we're starting to get into a sample size that's a little bit more palatable than 5, 6, 7, 8 games. We're now at that 12, 13, 14 game mark, where still some of these numbers will come down, but they're not as drastically inflated or deflated with a really small sample size now that we're an 8th into the schedule. But the second highest scoring team in the NHL is the Montreal Canadiens at 3.67 goals per game. The only team that scores more right now is the Winnipeg Jets, who hung a 5 spot on the Flyers. Then you look at where the Flyers are when it comes to goals for games played, and they're 26th in the NHL at 2.58. The Flyers also give up exactly 2.58 goals per game. They don't give up a ton. And Montreal actually gives up 3 goals per game. But, I mean, the Flyers at that 2.58 are 5th in goals allowed per games played this season. That's the reason why they have 1 game north of Hockey 500 record. They got to get back to that, but they got to find a way to generate offense. And, some guys, like Owen Tippett got off to a good start. He needs to start kicking pucks back in and all that goes with it. So losing Tyson Forster, obviously not ideal. It's not, because the trickle-down effect of it is pretty pronounced to me when you look at Forster being out. Obviously, the predictability and the combination and effectiveness of that line with Cates, Brink, and Forster is there. You kind of knew what you're going to get out of that line game in and game out. And with Forster out, it does change the dynamic. And I talked about this with Bill briefly in yesterday's episode and a little bit on the radio as well. The guy who goes in there to play with Brink and Cates, like when Tippett did, does he feel like he has to go in and try and play the game that Tyson Forster has, which is never the right move, because you want your guy to go in there and play to his strengths, to play his game, to his personality, to his preference. And sometimes when you see a line that's been going as well as that one and one guy's out hurt, somebody will try and get in there and try and do what that guy did. And that's not Owen Tippett. I didn't like Tippett on that line. We're going to get to a YouTube comment, and from Chris Brown, he said, honest question, is Michkov on the Cates Brink line absolute madness, or is it worth a try? Sure, Zegers would be nice to see there, but to spark Michkov, maybe put him with the top line to see if the magic can ignite. I miss Michkov mania. I miss it too. And I don't think you're out of line for asking for that. One of the things that I wrote down I want to talk about is line combinations in this one tonight. But Forster being out, going on IR, effective back to Sunday. Hopefully it's not longer term than that. We'll see if Sam Ersson is activated. He's eligible to return off IR today because it's been backdated to a week. So we'll see where it goes. But Forster being out's a big blow because of the trickle-down effect. And, you know, one of the things they're trying to figure out is combinations. Before we get to the conversation on line combinations, the Flyers did recall Emile Andre. I would imagine he'll be in the lineup tonight against Montreal. And for a team that's struggling to score, you got to get Andre in there. He generates offense. He thins a forecheck out a little bit when he has the puck, because he can make that stretch pass. And I'd like to see as much Andre as possible. I don't worry about the size thing until if it's an issue, it'll rear its head eventually that it's an issue. I don't think it's an issue now. And I think that he's a player that can help you generate offense from the back end more than any of the other guys that they put in. So I'm all for putting Emile Andre back in the lineup for sure. The Forster out, probably Andre in. 2-game road trip tonight in Montreal, and then Thursday in Nashville. Then they'll come back home and take on Claude Giroux and the Ottawa Senators on Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock. So a light week, because their game after Saturday is until next Wednesday against Edmonton when McDavid and Draisaitl come in. So it's a light week. Flyers have some practice, that time that they can get in. And Rick Tocchet said they're going to be working on going to the net front, tipping pucks, banging for rebounds, taking the goalie's eyes away, all that stuff. A lot. You got to drill that into them. Now, there was a shot in the third period, and the Flyers had 2 guys down around the blue paint, but neither guy, I'll get the video and we'll show it on an episode this week. We'll break it down. But neither guy was in front of Dustin Wolf to take his eyes away. They were on the sides like as flankers, but the shot coming from the point was straight through, clear-sighted, with nobody in front of him. One of the guys I know to the left of, well, to the right for Dustin Wolf, but to the left looking at the net was Grabenkin. And I was at the Zamboni entrance watching when that play happened. And I leaned to the guy next to me and said, can't be next to the goalie. Got to be in front of the goalie. You got to take his eyes away. You got to make him work to get around screens. We saw that in particular in Vladar's last start, trying to look around screens and find the release point and find pucks. In that game on Saturday, we saw it against against Toronto. We even saw it on Sunday on the first goal that Jonathan Huberdeau scores, using that layered screen, and Kolosov's trying to look around it, and when he can't find it, he goes down and he beats him bar down. So that's a huge thing. Shooters can shoot it from different release points and different looks. They don't always have to have their torso facing you anymore with these sticks, the way they can whip it. So that's something that, the Flyers got to do. You can't be next to the goalie. You can't get to the right spot. The most important element of that going to the net is taking the goalie's eyes away. It's a lot harder to play that position. I don't have to tell you guys, when you can't see the puck at release, or you have to deal with a screen. You have to slide into saves on the blocker side because you're looking on the short side, on the glove side. You see the guy's going to shoot that way. You slide into the save. And sometimes you don't get there because it's much, 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 much more difficult. So Flyers got to do what other teams are doing to them with the screens and the net front and banging for rebounds, and do that at the other end. duplicate what that team is doing to them. What you're trying to prevent the other team from doing in your end, you should be getting the other team to try and prevent you from doing it at the other end. And that's the middle of the ice. Flyers did it well in the beginning of the year. Last couple of games, they haven't attacked the middle quite as good. And I think that's a direct correlation to the result and the response that they've gotten in those games. And I think that's what has Rick Tocchet a little bit angry right now. Under control anger, but angry. So that's something we look for here coming up from this Flyers team that they need to do. They need to attack that middle of the ice better. You're not just going to beat goalies on long-ranging shots. You're going to have to be able to attack the middle and take the goalie's eyes away. We'll see if they can do it. I mean, it's such a big part of today's game that you almost have to do it, or you're dead meat. You're just not going to last. You're not going to do that. So we'll see if they're able to do that. That's the first adjustment to their game that they now have to make. Let's get to some fan comments from the YouTube channel. Paul said, this is from yesterday's episode, the lines were not jiving last night. Tippett and Brink with Cates. It was awful. Put Tip back with Couturier and Konechny. Put the Zegers, Dvorak, and Mishkov line back together. And he said, I wanted to see Gurbenkin on the Brink's Cates line. That's not a bad idea. I don't hate that. I don't. Look, I would try and get Mishkov going, and I would consider putting him on the left side on that line with Brink and Cates. Cates in the middle, Brink on the right, and Mishkov on the left. I would absolutely consider that. He said he works hard in the corners and wins a lot of puck battles. I think he'd be a nice fit with them. Speaking of Gurbenkin, I mean, Gurbenkin's probably kind of moves a little bit like Forster. He's not as defensively responsible as Forster. Forster's a very good 200-foot player, but I'm not against that either. How do these pieces all fit together? It's been a conundrum wrapped in a riddle for me, because I really haven't figured out who should play with who on a lot of things. I got an email from Colin. He said, following you and listening to your podcast daily, hope you're doing well. He said, reply to this on the show if you prefer, but I have to believe I'm not the only one thinking these thoughts. Is Zamula the best that we can do as a Flyers defenseman? I don't think he's good enough. He never seems to do much, not even as a stay-at-home type. He seems tentative, sometimes indecisive, slow, and at worst incapable. Is he the best we can do? Look, I favor pushing pace. I thought in particular in that Calgary game, we saw too many D-to-D regroups and letting the team get into their structure in the neutral zone. I think if you play fast, you don't let them do that. I think Emil Andre helps you play fast. Is Zamula a better, longer defender than Emil Andre? Yeah, maybe better, definitely longer. He said, I have great respect for Tocchet and really thought he'd weed out marginal performers. How is Zamula in the NHL? Well, look, it's not, I would prefer Andre in that position over Zamula, but it's not a stretch on a rebuilding team. Again, I prefer Andre there because of what he brings to me overall. I think he can defend a little bit. I think he's got a little pop offensively, and I think he can stretch the ice. Colin also said, everyone knows Mishkov is going to expertly thread a pass from the corner or below the goal line to the slot area. So why don't his line mates know to immediately go to the net in anticipation? Phenomenal question. He said, I watch every game, and it's not a matter of slow or inexperienced players on the ice with him. It seems so obvious, but what am I not seeing? Colin says he's a fan since 1971. Thanks for the email, Colin. Yeah, when you play with Mishkov, it's not easy for some players to play with guys like Mishkov, because as much as his unpredictability offensively is his weapon, it also makes him hard to play with sometimes. I don't think Tippett's like an easy guy to play with sometimes for line mates as well, because he can make things happen on his own, so you don't really know what he's going to do sometimes. And when he's really on his game, he's creative and he does things that you're like, whoa, didn't expect that. And I guarantee the D didn't expect that either because of his great athleticism. But it doesn't make him predictable to play with as a line mate, which is why we've talked about this, I think, in the summer, that I'd like to see Tippett be a guy that does generate offense individually at times and at key times when nothing's going right or you need a goal. But I also like to see him develop some more offense and goal scoring out of line play or a cycle or those kind of things. That's a next step for me with him in his evolution as an NHL player. Now, he's in his prime. but I'd like to see that added to his game. I think it makes him more complete. And it also, if he's not scoring or goes on a cold streak, it also makes him part of offense created and production, even if he is not the one that scores the goal. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's something that I look at with him. And with Mishkov, again, that unpredictability. When you play with him, you got to just go to areas and you've got to always be ready to get the puck, even if you don't think there's any chance in hell he can get it to you. You got to anticipate that he will. I've talked to Christian Dvorak about this when he was playing with Mishkov and Zegras. I talked to him in between periods of the game. I think it was on Saturday. And I said, when you're playing with those two guys, you've got to be really aware that they can get you the puck when at any time. And he's like, absolutely. You got to go into it knowing that those two can do magical things with the puck and deliver a pass to your tape when you don't think there's any chance they're going to get it to you. So it takes time to get used to that, to those players, because through repetition as a line mate with Michkov, there does become some predictability when you play with them every day. Not as much to the opponent, but with you as a line mate. You start to notice, hey, when I go here in this situation, he will get me the puck. Or when I go here, it really hems him in or limits him. You start to feel those things on the ice. So with Mishkov, I thought he was like ready to pop after Thursday's game. I didn't think he had a great weekend. I did not like the line with Abels, him. I would probably try him either with that Brink and Cates, or I would try him with Zegras and Dvorak again. That's probably where I would go. But what I would also do is find hell and high water a way to get him going, putting the puck in there. He's only got one goal in the season. Again, I think he's contributed offensively. He's generated offense. I thought in particular in the Nashville game, there was a shift in the first period. I think he did 4 good things. A really good defensive play on the back check, a great play defensively in the neutral zone, and created 2 offensive scoring chances. A perfect shift for me. I'm not asking him to duplicate that, but I'd find a way to get him going. And that's going to be playing with either Cates and Brink or Couturier and Konechny or some combination or Zegras and Dvorak. But these lines, like I'm trying to figure out how they fit together that makes the most sense for some staying power. And I just haven't seen enough yet to really dial in on certain 3 guys together other than Cates, Forster, and Brink. But with Forster out, obviously that is not part of the equation. So you got to take that out of the whole thing. So again, it's something you got to figure out. It's going to take a little time to figure it out, to get the lines where you want them. Where does Gurbankin fit into this mix? He's a guy I'd like to see more of. I don't mind the approach of with Gurbankin playing him a few games and then letting him sit and coaching him, as Talk has talked about. I think you don't overwhelm the player that way. And there are some things from the offensive blue line back that he needs to work on, reading the plays and where to go in the neutral zone, where to defend the blue line, to angle guys and all of that stuff. So I don't mind that. But to me, he's one of those players that I could see just getting more and more comfortable as we go through the season. To me, he's absolutely an NHL player, and he's got a body. I think he goes to really instinctually goes to the right areas for the most part in the offensive zone, with the exception of the play I talked about earlier where, you go to the net, but you got to get in front of the goalie. And look, I think those things of playing with will and screening the goalie become contagious in the sport. It happens once, and then you see another line do it. They go, look, we can take his eyes away. It gets talked about on the bench, the coaching staff and the players. Look, get in front of him. You get in front of him, I'll do this. And it generates offense and it generates goals. And it's one of those things that becomes contagious, but it takes the first couple of times for it to happen, for it to catch on, for the brush fire to start to spread. And I think Talk said, he said, we have 1 tipping goal this entire season so far. And he said, that's almost alarming 12 games in. I agree. In today's NHL, in any NHL, you got to have tipping goals because it means that you're flowing to the front of the net in front of the goalie. And the fact that there's only 1 in 12 games, when Talk says that's alarming, I go, You got to be willing to go there, though. That's something that once they start doing it, preferably tonight, that can become contagious and it can become part of your identity. Man, this team goes to the front of the net, not the side of the net, the front of the net a ton. You see some of those pretty plays that happen on the side of the net where a guy, it's just a backdoor tap in or a redirect. But that's not the way to make the living go into the net. The way to make the living going to the net is stepping in front of the goalie's eyes. Take those away. I got to get Bush on. I'll talk to Bush about it, about how much more. When a guy stays to your side as a goalie, you're like, thank you. When a guy goes in front of you, you're rubbernecking, trying to find the puck around him. 1,000 times more difficult. 1,000 times. I got an email from a guy about working around screens that I'm going to address in a later episode this week with video, so we can really kind of look at it and talk about how a goalie is to work around screens. Because one of the things he was talking about was, does the goalie have preferences? And yet, some goalies do. They have a preference. They like to lean into the short side, or they like to lean long to slide into a save. All of those things. And that takes a lot of communication and looking at video with your defensemen or wingers and guys that like to block shots. When the guy's here, get out of the way. I don't need a tip off your stick to complicate matters on a far shot. Those conversations happen. It takes a little bit of time. We are early in the season, but it is the Flyers and the Canadiens tonight. Flyers back on the road to take on the Habs. The first place Habs tonight in the Atlantic Division. Flyers will look to grab 2 points and start to move things back in the right direction after 2 straight losses against a team in Montreal who's won 3 straight games. We'll break it down tomorrow. Join us then on a brand new Flyers Daily.